Greetings. That was quick. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Masters of Health, and we have a new guest. As usual, we have a brand new guest every week. This guest is one of my special guests. This is one of our co-hosts for True Health Live, Dr. Alia Komsany. Alia,
Hi.
So,
Hi.
Alia, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what your profession is, and also there was you have some letters after your name on LinkedIn. Please explain, because I would not be the best one. The only one that was familiar to me was PhD. Everything else, I was like, what? Let us know.
Okay, so hi everyone. It was a pleasure to be invited on the show. Thank you, Deidre. So yeah, just a little bit of background about myself. So let's see, how far back do we want to go? So I basically did a bachelor's degree in biomedical science, and then I went on to do a master's specializing in cancer. I then went on to work as a research assistant in a cancer-related kind of project, cancer-related research lab. And after doing that for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to go continue on with doing a PhD, or what we call a DPhil. So that's probably where you see the acronym DPhil and
Yeah.
after my name. So it's Doctor of Philosophy. So yeah, it's kind of reserved to people that graduate from Oxford or Cambridge, and it's kind of like a specialized, yeah, which I'm told I should just go for PhD. Not many people get it, but yeah, once you've gone through that hard slog, and you've been through the literally you've gone through all the challenges, yeah, that basically are entailed within a PhD, and doing it at such a prestigious institution, it's like, okay, I deserve those acronyms.
Right.
I might as well use them.
That's interesting. I remember when I finished, I just was like, I paid for these letters, so let me just
Yeah,
make
exactly.
as much as I can, because I wasn't using them all the time. And then somebody said, but you paid for them. I was like, you got a
Yeah.
point. I guess I should start using them. What was it like? That's interesting. What was it like attending Oxford?
So it's interesting because I did my bachelor's degree in London, at a very, kind of like central city university, and it was very diverse. So going to Oxford wasn't initially something that I had planned on doing. It wasn't a dream of mine. It just, I fancied, a change,
Yeah.
and I was researching the different kind of opportunities available to me, and I thought, why not, get in contact with this particular lab that was doing, interesting research. And it so happened that, I went up to Oxford. I kind of fell in love with it. um, Not, I mean, aesthetically, but kind of, it was, yeah, it slowly growed on me eventually, because
Mhm.
going from a city to kind of like more of a countryside kind of setting was very
Yeah.
different for me. And also, a less diverse population, it was challenging in a number of aspects. But yeah, so I basically had, was given the opportunity, and I thought, why not? I fancied a change. And like I say, the research, the topic that I was, working within was just something that was very interesting at the time.
Yeah. Was it the academics that really pulled you in, like maybe how they fashioned the program?
No, it was more about, I think, what drew me to that particular lab was just the environment. It was
Mm.
just very relaxed. It wasn't typical as what you would expect from a high research,
Oh,
high functioning research lab. It was very much about community, about, making sure checking in on everyone, and, sharing information, as opposed to being so high, competitive, and,
yeah. Oh,
how it can be. So that
yeah.
really appealed to me. And I
Yeah.
think I was really lucky because, the stories I've heard have, a lot of them have been, really off-putting in that sense. So it's
Mhm.
really lucky to find, people that were very accepting of me, people that were very inclusive, and, just a really nice work environment. So kind of that led me, that was a really good, welcoming environment for me, and it was something that you know in the end made my decision to stay a lot more easier.
Yeah. So what was it like? Well, no. Uh, what kind of places have you been at? Like, so, you're doing research, you talked about like working in labs. So like one of
Mhm.
the things like I like to ask guests, like, where has some of your work in research like taken you? Like,
Mhm.
because this channel is about like people who move in the spaces of public health, and interestingly enough, I'm like, research is one of the foundations, right?
Mhm.
And I'm always interested, like, I always, when I get someone who has like maybe experiences from the field, I always like them to share like some stories. So like a
Mhm.
first part of that is like, where has some of that taken you?
So I kind of dip and dab in a number of different kind of aspects, as you probably kind of figured out by now. So so I've tried a number of different research areas. I did the biomedical science degree. Essentially, was a really flexible degree in the sense that you could choose a number of different modules. You weren't kind of it wasn't really so fixed in that sense. So I was able to take a number of different interesting modules, pharmacology, psychology, different aspects. And, that's something I really enjoyed, like the mixing and matching of different things and kind of interconnecting, the similarities between the different topics. But I also, I think at the very beginning, I was, taking part in a number of kind of more public health related kind of projects. So there was one project, for example, that I took part of. Is called, I was a leader of the teddy bear clinic, which was essentially a student-led, volunteer-based kind of charity group where we would essentially go into kind of like primary schools and teach the children about, healthy eating and, dental hygiene and different things like that. So I think from the very start, that's what I kind of like, really like kind of the aspect of the community aspect, the
Mhm.
translation of that kind of the more theoretical research, heavy duty stuff, and bridging the gap essentially between that and communicating that the benefits of maintaining a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I say, so I did a bit of research at the UCL Ear Institute, which was another avenue, a little bit, different research there, learning different protocols, different techniques, but all the while, and I kept that kind of community-based educational kind of projects ongoing. So, for example, during my PhD as well, I really wanted to kind of help improve access. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to go to such a really good institution, but I wanted to help facilitate others and give them the opportunities and, kind of mentor students,
Mhm.
to give them the chance, to kind of apply to such a university if they wanted to, and enable them to kind of have the best opportunity and chance and put themselves forward and have the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I took a part in, like, whether it be student mentoring, helping people, students that were doing their master's degree, with their projects.
Mhm.
I kind of really enjoyed that aspect of things. It kind of broke the monotony of like day in, day out of kind of having to
Mhm.
motivate myself to do my own research.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
seeing that I was actually, taking, a break from that, from my own kind of project, and helping other people with their projects was really kind of like something that I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's kind of like reaching back, right? Like, or paying
yes,
forward,
yes,
like,
yeah,
yes,
exactly.
really think about like when you work with youth, it's you're paying it forward, like,
Yeah,
giving them like insight onto like avenues they can take, or even like helping them out, especially with what you're doing, because it's very much
yeah,
STEM, right?
yes,
So, and that's
yes.
what we have a lot of lacking in this part of the world, right?
Yeah, yeah, and exactly, and there's a lot of the it lacks. I mean, there's an it tends to kind of kind of like attract a certain group, and many others don't really have as much access to it, or don't think they are capable of pursuing such such careers. So it was really important for me and really satisfying as well to kind of contribute towards helping someone
Yeah.
potentially, pursue a STEM career.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
Is that some of what you do? Because I saw that not only are you the postdoctoral researcher at Weill Cornell, I learned
Yeah.
I used to say it wrong. I was like, it's not Lyle, Weill Cornell. I was like,
Will Cornell, yes.
Weill Cornell.
Yes.
You do the youth program, like the cancer prevention program. So tell us a
Yes.
little bit about
So yeah, I was really lucky. Again, I think I just like step into opportunities, which I'm really, really grateful for. They say, I don't know, the energy you put out attracts, the things that are good for you. So I kind of believe in that. And yes, originally I did want to go into, so after completing my PhD, I did want to go into more teaching, again, education, because as much as I love the research aspect, I just felt it was very isolating. I wasn't really, all the discoveries we were making and findings that we were coming across, we like the practical aspect of that. I was not really much, getting as much involved in, and that's really where the community side of things, the education about prevention. That was something that I really wanted to do. But I just didn't think there was an opportunity for me, having not pursued a MPH
that.
essentially. I just wasn't, and again, it was not the trajectory that people advise you to take after doing a PhD. It's all this, the very kind of classic,
Yeah,
do a
get it.
PhD, do a postdoc, and then after you do multiple years of postdoctoral research, then potentially you'll have the opportunity of climbing up the academic ladder and teaching at university level. So it's just a long way off. And I thought, okay, I had moved recently, moved from the UK to the US, so a completely different playing field as well. I just literally had no idea, what was open to me at the time. And that's why essentially I applied for postdoctoral research positions. And I thought, okay, that's the way forward. And then, I'll do that and then see where that takes me, see if I like it.
Yeah,
And that's when I was interviewed for the position at the Department of Pathology, as a postdoctoral researcher. I mentioned during interview, and this is something that I really would recommend people doing, is, you know, you don't have to stick to a kind of rehearsed set of answers, and you don't have to kind of hide elements of yourself. I think it's really important to kind of highlight your interests, outside of, kind of like anything specific that you're applying for, because it does contribute to kind of adding more to kind of your personality, showcasing more of your personality, and potentially opening you up to kind of opportunities that you wouldn't have even thought of. So
yeah,
when I did mention that interview that I was interested in, diversity, um, prevention, cancer prevention, when it comes to kind of minority groups, and that kind of thing, it was then offered to me, oh, actually, we have a position that you might be interested in alongside your postdoctoral, role. And I was like,
right.
oh, okay, so there is that opportunity. And oh wow, that's amazing. That's something where I can, kind of do both, kill two birds with one stone essentially,
Yeah,
and pursue both things that I enjoy. And that's basically how it happened. And that's how I kind of took on the position of youth program lead,
mhm,
where I kind of am tailoring and coming up with different, well, specifically a peer-to-peer program at the moment, where we can kind of teach the youth about cancer prevention, and tackle any kind of misconceptions they may have, so that they can go on to educate their peers. And essentially also, because we know in immigrant populations especially, youth play a great role in educating their parents as well.
yeah,
So it's kind of like, tackling two kind of barriers that we already know exist, when it comes to prevention of cancer from an early age before it gets, further down the line, and
yeah.
also, educating the elders that may be in the household that may not know, or may not have come across information that they need.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna jump over to the chat. Peace, everyone. Peace, Precious Stepney. Thank you, loud and clear. Greetings to you. Peace, Naya, Sister Kashia. Greetings, Chief Yuya. Thank you for showing out and showing up, or is it the other way? Showing up and showing out. Greetings, Antonio. Everyone, welcome to the chat. If you have any questions for Alia, please make sure she's like Miss Postdoctoral Research.
Yeah.
So if you have questions, please share. So I do have a question for you, because like sometimes when people think research, they think lab, and you did mention like some lab work, but like not everything is like mixing up chemicals, even though I like to like my head goes to Pinky and the Brain. But what are some of the research projects that you have been part of, or what are you doing right now with your postdoctoral research?
So the postdoctoral research, essentially, I haven't, well, owing to COVID as well, that's kind of stopped any potential lab work that may have been, on the table to do. But essentially, I do a lot of grant writing, helping with, manuscript writing, compiling data, analyzing data, putting together figures. But essentially, I am meant to be, and hopefully, now as we kind of going back to work physically, etc. I hope to do, collaborate on a specific project where kind of again compiling data. It's pathology based, so I would be kind of analyzing different slides, histology, that kind of thing. So it is when you do talk about research, when you talk about more clinical based research, it tends to be more lab based.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you're limited to, again, experiments. It can be more, it can involve population health. It can involve other aspects that not necessarily, deal with like cells. But my research in particular it's more predominantly based on kind of molecular biology. So, experimenting on different cells, analyzing data, etc.
Yeah, I'm like, tell us a little bit about experimenting. Cell
No, thanks.
experimenting. No, is it boring or is it like top secret?
So it's not boring. It's actually really fascinating. And I could go on, off on a tangent with this. It's actually fascinating because at the time when I was taking care of my cells, I like to call them my babies because essentially they are, any wrong move and they die, and you got to keep them alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that, many experiments involve going in at night, time course experiments where you have to kind of throughout the night have to take, samples and analyze them. And you have to be very kind of these samples need to be frozen. They need to be kept at, in specific conditions in order to preserve kind of like the biology essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't boring. It never is boring. It's always very kind of fascinating for me. But the thing that it is very isolating, and it tends to be very lonely. And you don't get to see many, you don't tend to see people. People are just kind of huddled at their computers or kind of in the lab, deep in thought, trying to kind of come up with ideas and, things to do when it comes to different experiments. So it's nice. I mean, I did enjoy it in terms of like, getting the results and, potentially coming across some, amazing discovery, which is always something that keeps you motivated. But yeah, it has its highs and its lows, basically. I mean, essentially, you could be working on an experiment for a month, and at the end of it, you get no results, or something goes wrong along the way, and it's just like, oh, I have to redo this all over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that sense, it can be really difficult. But kind of bridging the gap between the bench to bedside, knowing that you're contributing to something, a treatment or development of a drug that potentially could help someone out in need, with a specific disease. I think that was ultimately the motivating factor for me. But also, like I say, kind of translating all that theory into
Mm-hmm.
practice
Yeah.
and actually physically seeing the difference you can make in people's life when it comes to education, I think is, if not more satisfying.
Yeah. Have you
Yeah.
ever thought about, because right now you're in academia, have you ever
Yes.
thought about taking your skills like private, like pharma? Like,
I don't think that's for me, to be honest. I really am enjoying the public health role, and
that's
I
good.
think that's something that I really want to stick with. I do potentially eventually want to go more into kind of population health and epidemiology, kind of bring that
Yeah.
into the
Mm,
mix as well,
yeah.
because I really find that really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the research will always be something that I do. But like I say, public health for me right now is something that, now that I've tapped into it a little bit more, I'm gaining a little bit more confidence, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more exposure. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
Um,
And we need like biostatisticians and epidemiologists, especially now. Like I think and we talked about this before, like it's like public health is like burst on the scene. It's like pandemic.
yeah,
What is that?
yes,
It's like,
yes,
you people who are toxicologists, you got people out here testing water, testing dirt, like, and these have been things that have been going on for years, like decades. And it's like now it's like, really cool and popular to do that because you have inside data on things that are happening where
yeah,
people are now really interested. Like, I don't believe what the TV's saying. What I
yeah,
know who actually does da 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 da, and they
yeah,
said
yeah.
So I think
I
like those.
think I think during this pandemic, especially like you say, having those skills, I've known, yeah, I mean, they give you that certain edge when it comes to kind of like, critiquing papers, the publications, being able to kind of skim through, get a really, basic idea of what's going on, and you are more, you're equipped with the skills that will enable you to kind of analyze data in
Mm-hmm.
the best way and kind of differentiate between things that are actually untrue and things that are true, and kind of
Yeah,
that's something I really would like to educate people on as well,
yeah.
because lay people just don't understand, and
Oh,
unfortunately the media skews a lot of things. You can't really rely on that to kind of the exchange of information is just, it's overwhelming for some, it's confusing, but being able to break that down into a more simple format is
yeah,
something that's really important.
yeah. And most people, they're not going to like sorry,
No.
acronyms, journal, Journal
Yeah.
of oh wow, I don't even remember, Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA. Did I just
Jama,
hold
yes.
JAMA, the Journal
Yeah,
of the Medical Association, or there's like NIJM, New England Journal of
yeah,
Medicine.
yes,
There's
yes,
all
yes,
these
Najum.
journals. And this is where when people like Alia, like when they have like research and like breakthroughs, or even if it's ongoing, they'll submit an abstract and an article, like, of what their study was. And it has like methodology, conclusion,
Yeah,
like there's all sections of research and a study and how it's like played out on paper. And it can be quite daunting and quite intimidating to read
yes,
these things. And this is how, like, this is why you'll need like those people, the other people in public health, like who will be able, like epidemiologists or
yeah,
biostatistician, even like the people who do health comms, because they're able to read it and then like make a compelling story and make it
yeah.
succinct. Unfortunately, a lot of the times it passes through so many hands, and then sometimes it gets to the media like, oh, we're going to just say this. And it's not to say that some people are not giving appropriate information, but even for a newscaster, interpreting
They don't
research,
know.
not,
Yeah,
it's not an easy thing. Like even like
no.
even for MPHs, like we're trained to do that, but like it can be really tricky. So when you're
Yeah,
looking at it, you have to be very mindful of like what you're saying and what you're reading and how
mhm,
the words you use to actually read out what the paper is saying the
mhm.
results are. Like it's not like oh, it's just this. I mean, if you're trained, then it's fine. But like,
Yeah.
so for
But even then, it's interesting because
yeah,
I've come across a number of medics who also, they just are not. I don't know what it is. They either read through the abstract and don't go into detail, or they don't have the time. For whatever reason, they're just not aware of the kind of intricacies. And only if you've been in research and you've had to kind of defend a thesis and had to kind of go through the process of what it takes to kind of verify something, and essentially kind of the data, how easy it is to manipulate the data as well.
it is.
um, so you can look out for that, and you can easily pull it out if if that's been, if the paper itself is being that's published is weak. So I think that gives you, yeah, definitely having that background is very helpful.
Yeah, we have some questions.
Mhm.
One from you. Yeah, she knows everything. Like I need to be my guest, and I'm like, where do these questions come from? I don't even. Okay, so Yuya asks, greetings. Have you explored the concept of Rudolf Virchow on the pathological studies of cancer? And if so or not, do the microscopic study of cells show links between modern technology use and illness? Our self.
Interesting.
That's how
I
I'm the media at that point. Like, are your cell phones killing? But
so
Interesting question. I don't know who Rudolph Virchow is, but enlighten us.
I don't have much information on that, to be honest. My speciality in cancer was more to do with blood vessels and cancer, and understanding how we can kind of, because our understanding is that cancer essentially hijacks the body system of forming new blood vessels such that it can survive and supply itself with oxygen and nutrients. So essentially it was thought, the Folkman theory that was put out initially, it was thought, okay, if we can target these blood vessels with a drug, then we can potentially shrink the tumor and essentially it would die. Of course that's, that would be the ideal situation. However, cancer being cancer, and what attracted me to cancer in the first place is the fact that it's just not one single disease. It's made up of a number of different diseases, and everyone is, genetic makeup is going to dictate how that tumor is going to develop. So we know that cancer is not, homologous. It's not just one kind in every person. You're going to have, different mechanisms and different pathways, and that was basically my research, was identifying the different targets, pulling down the different processes, potential pathways, and trying to find any kind of targets that we could essentially develop drugs against.
Okay.
So in relation to that question, I don't really have the expertise to answer that.
Okay. What about any info on like technology use in illness?
Technology use in illness. I mean, to be honest, so during my research, my PhD research, we did use mass spectrometry, which is basically a machine that basically sorts out proteins, put simply. And we used to inject samples into that. And I mean, we used a lot of robotics as well in the lab. So ease of use, when you're kind of analyzing a number of samples, it technology can be very helpful. However, it does take away that human aspect of things, and I think we should use it of course, technology has been proven to be very beneficial when it comes to medicine, when it comes to kind of lab-based kind of techniques, etc. They can cut down the manpower, the time,
Yeah.
and they can, especially when it comes to kind of robotics, keyhole surgery and that kind of thing, where we don't have to make, incisions. When it comes to surgery, that can be, really beneficial for patient recovery and just, for making a surgery more optimum. So in that sense, I think technology has been beneficial, but I think we have to kind of maintain that balance. We still need that human element, and it still needs to be driven by, humans essentially. And we can't leave everything down to kind of relying on too much on
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah. Have you had any like experience, or maybe even like colleagues who are studying like the correlation between like we talk about I have two machines in front of me right now, and on
Yeah,
a given moment it's like it's three or four, and the cell phones. Like I can't even imagine the amount of radiation I've exposed myself to.
yeah.
So it's like, have you had any like experience or like done any work in that area, like looking for those correlations or?
No. I mean, and the research is, there's so many things you can research on. And the problem is when you take on a PhD project, you tend to become a specialist within that very small niche.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Like,
it's a very small piece of the puzzle.
yeah.
Um, so that's the thing. You tend to kind of really focus on that and
Yeah.
become blinded to almost
To everything
everything else,
else.
because
Mhm.
yeah, it's a big topic in itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there are the causes of cancer when it comes to kind of exposure to different environmental factors. Of course, it goes without saying. But then again, it's so difficult to say exactly, because, and this is why it's important. What I was trying to do was more precision-based medicine. So essentially, applying the rule that one size doesn't fit all. And that is essentially the case. Some people are genetically made up in such a way that they're not affected as much as other people would be. One person's exposure may, put them in harm's way,
Mhm.
and put them at that risk, whereas someone else, would need twice the the amount of exposure. So
Yeah.
it all varies, and it's very difficult to pinpoint and say, that person got cancer because they were using, they were exposed to all this, amount of radiation, or whatever. And that's also the interesting thing about cancer, because again, multiple factors could be at play here.
Mm.
Ultimately, we know it, comes about as a result of a mutation. The body repairs itself, is able to repair itself, it's able to undergo, form new, it's, undergoing renewal constantly. And it's essentially when that process is kind of, hindered in a sense,
Yeah.
that that leads to that uncontrolled proliferation and cell division.
Mm-hmm.
So a number of factors can contribute to that.
Yeah.
And that's not even going into kind of radiation is like one, environmental factors is probably another. Then you've got mental health as well, psychology. So it's very complex.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. We have another question, Brother Antonio. He says, are there news outlets, and I think both like conventional and online media outlets, who have been able to find a sweet spot between informative and accurate and accessible to the layperson?
I wouldn't say there is actually. And I think this pandemic as well has highlighted how we lack those kind of resources.
Yeah.
Um, there is no one place you can go to and, get information that's fully reliable, I don't think, or, that's accessible to the layperson in such a way that they would understand. And I think it goes back to, again, and this is why this motivates me to kind of educate, within youth programs. I think it's very important to kind of
Yeah.
bring that into the programming and the curriculum, so that we kind of can educate youth on how to kind of appraise, scientific papers, kind of how to understand. I mean, not going into too much detail, but just
Right.
enough to kind of enable
Yeah.
them to understand better, and then again go on to educate people within their household.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, something that we really do need to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. You
But
know,
then I think what a lot of what factors, sorry to interrupt you, Deidre, but a lot of what factors into that as well is just our need for instant gratification. With everything, constantly scrolling, we want
me,
fast
like,
information
put the
quickly.
answer now.
And we have, I mean, I love social media is so beneficial in so many ways, but at the same time it can be so detrimental, because you can't, such a topic that's so kind of complex, kind of, compiling a sort of infographic about it sometimes does not do it justice. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, it doesn't really highlight the full picture.
Yeah.
And people can get, it can, I mean, yeah, it leads to misunderstanding essentially in some cases.
It's so crazy because like I use infographics a lot because you're also working with like right now the human attention span is that of a goldfish. And that I learned, this was like in 2017 I learned.
Yeah.
Quite sure it is shortened. I don't know what is the shorter than a goldfish, because I'm like, when I first heard that, I was like, that's pretty short. And it made me even think about like how I can be like, a little like kind
Yeah.
of jargon all over the place. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, and so like when you're in like a field like public health, you think like, well, infographics, a picture is quick. Like people don't like to read, and so that's where some of the problem is, right? Like on
Exactly.
one,
Yeah.
like people don't have necessarily, they have not been equipped with the skills to be able to pick up a study and like, I'm gonna read this for myself and make sure that what they're saying is cool, right? But then on the other hand, it's like, do people want to? So it's like, where do you find like that balance?
The
Maybe what
balance. Yeah.
Right. Maybe what's happened with COVID and like, some of us realizing that, the phrase fake news wasn't so far off.
Yeah.
Um, how do we get people to like get there? And maybe some of them are because they're like, maybe that was right. Like
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
that wasn't wrong. Because and we
Yeah.
see, where with all of the commercials and the things, there's a lot of pushing to make certain actions and certain moves. We won't talk about it. Some people, are like, well, maybe I need to, maybe I should have, been a little bit more knowledgeable or like kind of seeking out information on my own so that I can interpret it, for myself?
I think, I definitely agree with you. And I question myself, how do we bring about that change? How do we change people's mentality such that, they have that, they want to seek that agency, essentially. They want to kind of take that initiative, because but then again, we live such, again, going back to how, our lifestyles are in this day and age, we just maybe don't have the time to kind of, because when I find myself having to kind of critique every single thing I come across, and kind of really look in depth, where they're getting this information from, where's the source, okay, what was the n number, the sample number, sample size, how many people, what was the control, was there a control, what are the limitations, it can be really, really draining,
Mm,
for someone even that can, that's used to seeing such information. So to what extent, if you're going to have to do that each and every time you come across something, it gets to a point where you're like, okay, well, there's only so much you can do.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Um,
so yeah.
Chief US says, thank you for that answer to the previous question. He appreciates it. Greetings, Sister Munira. Thank you for joining us. Another question from Chief US. I know that Hippocrates was considered to coin the term cancer, but I always wondered how present that particular issue was present in DNA in ancient times. There was quotation, ancient
Mm-hmm.
modern times. I think that was a question or a
So
statement.
can you repeat the question?
Hippocrates was considered to coin the term cancer, but I always wondered how present that particular issue was how present that particular issue was in DNA in ancient times compared to modern times. I think.
Mm-mm. Well, we were living different lifestyles. We were, I don't think it was as prevalent, and maybe we couldn't detect it as easily as we do now. So, we don't actually, I think modern times we're now able to screen better. We understand it better. We know the different types of cancer. We're a lot more knowledgeable about the pathways and processes. Um, but again, our lifestyle has changed. We're now living in the modern day. We have artificial lighting, we have food that's not as healthy, we have, environmental factors, pollution, so all these things, are, factor into the amount of cancer that we are seeing.
Yeah,
But also we're able to tackle it a lot better, and we're able to kind of catch it early, which I think is
yeah.
essentially, something that we've made a, great deal of advances on. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say catch it early, because we know, and we've been talking about this on the podcast
Yeah.
as we're talking about preventive medicine and health
Yeah.
screenings. We know that there are certain groups of people, mostly melanated people, melanin dominant,
Yeah.
don't catch it early, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not necessarily being proactive about healthcare. And so what happens is when the illness is diagnosed, it's a lot of the times like really far on. And so like
Hmm.
any to stay it or even eliminate so they can go into remission, because I don't want to say cure, but at least
Yeah.
go into remission, are slim to none, because of not necessarily getting those checkups, or maybe engaging in the lifestyles that do lead to
Hmm.
um, negative negative health outcomes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Thing that you say that. Yes, Brother Antonio, the pandemic of headlines, we are in that as well. All right, we got to
Yes.
sift through the headlines. And he also says thank you for your answer. I
Mm-hmm.
have you kind of walked us through your career path, and how you got to Oxford, why you went there, and like kind of coming from the UK to the US. Um, Tell us about I think I feel like you gave us I usually ask for like a pro and a con, pro and then something you wish you can change, but I feel like you kind of gave some of that to us.
Hmm.
So I want to ask, I'm going to throw in like a different question. Like, tell us about something like different that you do, because it's out there, but I was like, I'll let her tell us about it. Because you have really cool that I also think is really, like when we talk about like the things that we do outside of like the 9 to 5, like, are they also things that, are for the betterment of our health? And
Yeah.
you are an athlete, like an award-winning
Yes.
athlete. I think
Yes.
cool and something that should be shared. Let's tell the good people like what you also do on the side that is also public health related.
Yes. So while at Oxford, I've always kind of been into sport, but I just didn't have the opportunity to kind of tap into more competitive sport. And so while at Oxford, I don't know how it just again randomly was presented to me. Oxford is like the home of rowing. And it was like, well, I'm stuck here for like 4 years. So I might as well kind of try it out and see if I like it. And I was lucky because again, so Oxford is kind of divided into kind of colleges. So you've
Hmm.
got undergraduate colleges, you've got postgrad colleges, and then you've got ones that cater for both. In a sense, I'm grateful now looking back that I did apply to a postgraduate college because people were a little bit more mature. Again, I went to a college that was pretty diverse, again, very welcoming, and a sport that, is seen as elitist, was kind of accessible to me, in the sense that the people were very welcoming. Had not seen many people wearing a headscarf out on the water. So it was something like, I want to give this a try. It's not something I've tried before. It's not something that was presented to me before, and it's not something that I necessarily would have had access if I hadn't come to this university. Um, Access to. So yeah, I literally took it up. It involved, getting up at six ungodly hours in the morning, at 6:30 a.m. But it was beautiful in that, you push yourself to get up, to exercise with a crew. There's a sense of camaraderie there. You get up, you see the sunrise on the water. You're able to quieten your mind. It's physically beneficial, and you're able to just start your day off in a really good way before you head into kind of like doing more kind of heavy duty stuff.
Yeah.
So I literally became addicted to it, and I didn't
And
stop at that point. Just continued and continued doing it.
I was like,
Um,
goodness, she rose. I was like, I don't even know if I could. I'm like the arm strength.
so it's not an arm sport, contrary to what people think. It's a leg sport.
Oh, explain, please. Enlighten us.
So yeah, the main it's around 80% legs.
Oh, wow.
Literally.
Because
Yeah,
all you
and that
see is this, and I'm like, oh,
it's
so
basically,
body.
leg press. So you're kind of like it's a leg press. That's what it is. So you're kind of you're kind of holding your body, pivoting literally, and literally driving with your legs.
Whoa. Well, who knew?
Yeah. So and that's why, because I'm not the typical kind of tall, um I don't fit that stereotypical kind of image of what you'd imagine a rower to look like. I'm on the shorter end of things, but it just goes to show you that, like I say, I wouldn't have had access to the sport owing to kind of like different factors.
Yeah.
And that kind of enabled me to kind of, again, want to motivate younger athletes from, similar backgrounds to mine who would not have, otherwise would not have had access to such a sport, to
Yeah.
enable them to try it out. And that's something that, I'm really passionate about, alongside the competitive rowing, which I've continued on with. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to kind of, yeah, to take part in the Asian Games 2022,
Oh,
in
wow.
September. Yeah, so that's my ultimate goal.
I
So yeah,
see you. I'm like, is she practicing? Is she like training for something? I'm like,
yeah.
I wonder if like we could have like a podcaster host crew and like we'll go rowing with Alia like one early. I'm like, can I do that? The closest I
One
get to
day.
ferry in the dawning, and I'm like, but it is something about being on the water like early in the
Yes.
day. There is a calmingness to it, and I do kind of just like sit there.
Yeah. As long as it's not, yeah, as long as it's not choppy, it's very, weather-based sport. So you don't, ideally, I mean, you can't predict how the weather's going to be, but ideally you don't want to be, especially because now I don't row with a crew, so I row on my own
Hmm.
again, which is slightly isolating. You don't have that motivation, and it all kind of is literally on, you only have yourself to rely on, essentially.
Yeah.
You can't blame anyone
Hmm.
else for anything that goes wrong. But it's liberating at the same time. I'm able to kind of work alongside rowing because it gives you that sense of independence. But also I'm, very much, like I say, passionate about, diversifying the sport,
Hmm.
And being kind of like a representative for this, people who would not have otherwise seen a rower like myself. So
Yeah. Don't see a
that's
lot of gaps,
no,
you don't see a lot of covered heads with
no,
like, and
or
sometimes
diverse
yeah, it's
populations. You
not
don't
really,
see, yeah,
and sometimes
no,
it's so weird. Like, I don't know why, like, I'll catch something, I'll pass some sports channel and what regatta, is that what they call it? And I'm
yes,
just,
yes,
and
yeah,
I
you
would,
don't see, yeah. Yeah, it's a very, yeah, it's historically a very elite sport. So you wouldn't have expected anyone to kind of have that opportunity, or if they do take it up, it's because they give it up, within a short period of time because they just don't see anyone like them. And of course, you come into the sport a bit later, you haven't had the opportunities, as some of these other people have, and you get deterred because you're like, well, there's no motivation for me to continue with this
yeah,
sport.
yeah.
It's very expensive, it's not subsidized, and it's difficult to pursue. It's a challenging sport. It requires a lot of skill,
Hmm.
but definitely would say it's a worthwhile sport to pursue.
And to that point, Chief, you are asked, like, how do you balance the
Yeah,
athletics with the research
yeah.
and obligations, like early dawn?
That was, I think, that was always in, like, I think while at university it was, yeah, it was difficult to balance, but it was a lot easier because essentially, well, yes and no, because I was working in the lab and my experiments dictated my day. Essentially, it wasn't a 9 to 5 day like
Hmm.
most students, or it wasn't a degree where I could sit in a cafe or sit at home or work remotely. I had to physically be there. I had to deal with, experiments, chemicals, cells, etc. So that was the difficulty for me. And, but then again, it was either sleeping in or, getting up for those couple of hours, which I knew I wasn't going to be doing anything else, during that time. And then, that was like setting up the day for me going into work and giving me that kind of motivation to kind of creatively think and come up with different ideas and kind of give me that, that health benefit, that endorphin rush. I think
Yeah.
was really helpful. But then transitioning on to kind of more work athletic balance, that has been tremendously difficult,
Mm.
especially since I have to commute in to work, especially when, going back to work now that we're in office. It is a lot more difficult. And of course, I can't put in as much time as I'd like to. Again, the morning, training in the morning is helpful because I can be done by around 8 a.m. So I get up at 4:30, and I'm off the water at like 8 a.m. So
Yeah.
I can manage that a little bit better. But now that I have also, added to kind of like the challenge by, I have a small child, that's
Mhm.
also kind of made it a lot more challenging. But I think you just have to, when it comes to balancing things, yeah, you have to prioritize essentially. You've got to be realistic as well.
Mhm.
I don't train every single morning, and I do make up whatever training that I need to do on the weekends when I'm a little bit more freer.
Mhm.
So it's a bit, and then a lot of the time, if I can't do an outdoor training session, I will, swap it for an indoor one, which takes less time and of course, is less demanding.
Okay. Is it just like the apparatus with some water to create like the resistance?
No. So it's just basically a dynamic rowing machine which
Mm.
simulates, um, as close as we can get to like water.
Water. That's so
It's
cool.
not the same. It's not the same, but if you can't, get out, that's what you have to deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's
Yeah.
like where get in where you fit in. It's like,
Yes.
if you
Exactly.
really want to do it, you have to like be intentional about your day and like create.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And like,
But also you've got to be realistic and you've got to kind of, know your limits, and not be too hard on yourself as well.
yeah.
But like
And
I
you,
say, whenever I do feel like demotivated, there are many mornings I wake up and I'm like, why am I doing this? I could just be sleeping. The extra 2 hours of sleep would be like amazing.
yeah.
But once I'm out,
Once
that's
you get
when I'm like,
out,
I'm
it's
glad.
so much
Yes,
better.
I'm glad
Yeah.
I'm out. It does wonders for your mental health.
Hmm.
It just, that escape as well. You're on the water. You don't even have your phone with you. And you're just you're so focused on technique, you're so focused on like not capsizing that essentially you forget everything else.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you're right. Like, when you do get up and you get up early and, you use that time for what you want to do before you give any of your time to someone else, for a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Like, that's the best thing that you can do for yourself. And I don't row, but like, I try to like run as much as I can. Listen, I have my good weeks and my bad weeks. But
Yes.
I will say, like, those times where I get up and I just go, like when I'm done, I'm like, oh gosh, I feel so much better. I'm so glad I did it. And you get like, you have
Yes.
some of the best ideas and some of
Yes.
the best thoughts. It is. And a friend of mine, like a long time, she's like, well, I meditate when I run. I'm like, how do you even meditate when you run? You got to be still. You got to be quiet.
But it's
No,
it's
it's a form of
that
meditation.
it's that, so rowing essentially, I read a book about this actually, and I can't remember the name of the book. I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment, but the guy was saying how shaving, the act of shaving, became almost meditative. So it became a meditation for him because it was repetitive. And
Mm,
I do find that with rowing, it's a very repetitive sport. You're doing the same action over and over and over again, to the point where it almost becomes a moving meditation.
yeah. It's like
Um,
you find a rhythm and, like even
yes. And you
run,
tap into that.
you tap
Yeah.
into rhythm. It's like
Yeah.
left, right
Yeah.
foot, left foot, right foot. And you just like go. Yeah. Peace, Sham the Joy. She says, peace, all amazing. Would you recommend that all health professionals have an athletic outlet? That is a really great question. Thank you.
Mm. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Of course, I mean, it depends on the person, the type of person. So like I say, I've always been into sport, but I know many people probably wouldn't opt for that. I mean, for them, that may not be their outlet of choice. But yes, I definitely think as well, given the fact that, lockdown, etc., we've been so kind of isolated. We haven't really got out and moved as much. And we know the wonders, movement, whatever that movement may be, can do for mental health. I think, would be something to potentially look into, incorporate within someone's lifestyle for sure. It's just
Yeah.
about, I think, finding what works for you.
Yeah. Like
Um,
finding something.
not running doesn't work for everyone.
No.
It's just taking the
It works.
initiative, I guess, and just trying out different things.
Yeah. Yeah. You can find something. There's something for everybody. And some things are athletic and you don't even realize like that it
Yeah.
is. So like some sort of movement, I think, Sham the Joy. Like, but yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's a really good point because it's almost like, practice what you preach, right? So if we're in
Yes.
public health, like how can we, have sedentary lifestyles? Like, if we're talking about things that people can do to promote
Yeah.
health, prolong life, and prevent disease, then we should probably be doing something like, acting out and being like, that what we do in action to prove like, this works,
Yeah, because it's a comprehensive, public health is comprehensive in the sense
Yeah.
that it's not just, it's putting into practice, like you say, and especially when it comes to youth as well. So I'm focused on the youth because, quite frankly, that's where we need to kind of
Yeah.
develop
Probably no
these kind of
hope for the
things.
rest of the old folks.
Yeah. I mean, we still have
The world
hope for
will
them, but
change one funeral at a time.
yes, exactly. But I think it can do wonders for, like you say, creativity and health.
Yeah, yeah. So last question, Alia.
Mhm.
What advice do you have for someone who is pursuing a career in public health, specifically research, since that's where you are, if they're interested in that area?
So, like I said, always kind of don't be rigid with the kind of path that you take. Be willing to explore different avenues and different aspects. And maybe you may not be able to do that within your set framework that you have set up within a university, but I would recommend for sure, taking the initiative, finding different projects on a volunteer basis or otherwise, where you
Mhm.
can get, hands-on experience. I think getting the experience is, of course, essential, and really kind of tapping into kind of topics that you may not necessarily have, get exposed to alongside a traditional kind of trajectory. And yeah, just try out different things, see what you like, and see what kind of aspects really appeal to you.
Yeah.
And you'll have a better idea of what you really want to pursue. Because I think a lot of young people today, especially I found with myself, they're just confused as to what they don't even know what they, want to do.
Mhm.
And there's so much pressure to kind of pursue traditional careers that I think we don't allow for flexibility when it comes to kind of trying different things and seeing what works for
Mhm.
different people. And I was reading another book, which I cannot remember the name of either.
If you do, we can put
Excuse
it
me. But yes, I will add these two titles. But it was basically, the gist of the book was basically saying that people who pursue a more diverse pathway and a less targeted, one-dimensional pathway tend to be a lot more successful.
in.
Um,
Diversify. It's like
so yeah,
diversify. Yeah.
yeah. So trying different things, taking the initiative to attend different events that may expose you to different, career opportunities, networking, talking to people, getting their advice within people, people within the field, and really getting a better idea of what you actually want to do, and then kind of aiming and, putting yourself in that kind of a,
Yeah.
place to get that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are wise words to stop with. Like, put yourself out there and go for it. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Alia, for
No,
joining us
thank you
here.
for inviting me.
Of course, of
And I'm
course.
sorry about the lighting. It's like day
No,
and night,
you know what?
literally.
But your face is bright, so
Yeah,
it didn't
yeah,
even matter.
yeah.
I had one guest, and it was like it got progressively darker, and like this is like zombie apocalypse happening right now. It's like, oh, I can't. The interview was so good, but like we can see like your face like is like bright and clear, so
Perfect.
it's totally fine.
Perfect.
Yes, the sun is setting, folks. This is just what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. You can
No,
catch
thank
more of
you.
Ali. Check into True Health Live podcast. She's one of our co-hosts. She brings us like the research and where the rest of us we all have like our different niche. So Alia fills us in on that end of the research when we're talking about things. You can catch us on the True Health Live channel. We're talking about health screenings. The next show is mammograms. It's going to be a hoot.
Mhm.
I had my first mammogram experience, and I'm going to be doing a tell-all. And so, so keep tuned for that. Stay tuned for that. Also, if you know people who are looking to share their story, let us know. Same thing for Masters of Health. If there's a guest or a particular career you would like to, hear from, shoot me an email and I'll make sure I'll look for those people. You can shoot me a DM. You can comment in the comment section. However, you're welcome. Give thanks, everyone. Sister Kashia, Sham the Joy, Chief Yuya, Precious, Stepney, Sister Winera, Brother Antonio, Sister Naya, and I think I got everybody. So thank you so much
All
for
right.
joining us. Or you're welcome, Sham the Joy. Thank you. And good evening to everyone. Catch us next week. We'll be interviewing Del Monte from the Center for Black Health Equity. So make sure you tune in at 6 p.m. Thank you so much, Alia. Peace,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you. Bye bye.